Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live broadcast today. So we're back, and this time it's for the International Women's Day Inspire Inclusion. So we're celebrating all women and girls globally for the International Women's Day tomorrow. And we've got some fabulous key guests that are experts as well within the life sciences industry. They're going to be joining me later on today. But for those of you that are completely new to joining the Lift Up community group, I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro into Lift Up itself. So our mission here is to connect, inspire and champion women all the way from academia through to C-suite in the life sciences industry. And this Lift Up community group was built on the back of some female ambassadors within the Fraser Dove International team here about 18 months ago now. And we're now 17 live broadcasts in. We've had over 40,000 global views. We've had some phenomenal key speakers that have joined us along the journey. We've also got Lift Up Journeys and podcasts that are being launched and released, which is really exciting. We've also got the Lift Up Connect as well, which is in-person, face-to-face live events. And actually the Lift Up Connect team were out in Basel on Monday, so earlier this week. So it's really about a community of leveraging all the wonderful relationships we've got with women in the industry to really try and champion their career journeys and support the next generation that are looking to climb that career ladder within the life sciences space. So that's a little bit about Lift Up. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction in regards to myself for those of you that have not met with me, but I am Louise Williams. So I am 19 years now in staffing, so 19 years in recruitment and 10 years in life sciences, very much focusing on the clinical and medical space specifically. I've joined Fraser Dove International coming up to 3 years actually this summer, and joined in operations, now MD here, so look after the practice areas internally and customer success. And I am obviously naturally a part of the Lift Up Ambassador group and have been part of these live broadcasts for the last year and a half. So there's a little bit about me. I also have a 7-year-old daughter and I have a 3-year-old son that keep me super busy outside of work. So yes, so I'd love to try and get our guests that are waiting in the background here into this live broadcast to really talk about the importance of inspiring inclusion and to share their career journeys and their thoughts and hopefully advice for some key takeaways for you in the audience. What I would love to say is, for those of you that are often part of this journey with us every single month, as you know, pop into the comments where it is that you're dialing from. We always love to hear. This is a great networking tool for you to all get to know each other. So as always, put your name in the comments where you're dialing from, perhaps what practice area or position you're holding within an organization and where geographically you're based around the world. We always get such a large reach across the globe, which is why we try to do this at 4 o'clock at GMT time to try and incorporate the best time zones for you all to join. Also, what I'd love to say is as you go throughout, this is a live interactive broadcast, and what it will enable us to do is for me to pull out any questions you've got in the comments, so I can throw those questions through to Lisa, Donielle and Carmen, our key speakers later today, so we can get you interactive and asking them questions directly. So when that happens, pop in a Q in front of your questions within the comments. We often get anywhere between 70 and 100 comments coming through, so it's quite a lot to navigate. So it's a lot easier for me to pick through if you pop in a Q at the beginning of your question. So yeah, so keep building the network, say hello, pop it in where it is that you're dialing in from. And I'm going to enter Lisa onto the stage for her to do her introduction. Hello, Lisa. Lovely to have you here today.
Hi, Louise. Good to be here.
Thank you. If we would love to do a introduction to the audience for us.
Sure. My background started as a physical therapist, working in healthcare. I started working up the ladder of hospital administration and decided that wasn't for me. I went back and got a PhD in physiology with emphasis in biophysics and a postdoc in pharmacology. From there, I took my first faculty position. So I thought my career would be strictly in academia. I worked up to chair of a department. My research interests were always in cell therapies, specifically in treating diabetes. Along the way, we had several patents, and industry started showing some interest in our patents. And at that point, I spun out the patents from the university and started a company, Likarda, We are located in Kansas City, and we provide the inactive ingredients that help cell therapies, biologics, advanced therapies to function better.
That's amazing. What a career journey as well, Lisa, and congratulations on starting up that business and inspiring journey you've had. And I'm going to bring in Donielle now to this live event. It's lovely to have you here with us today, Donielle. Would you like to do the audience an introduction?
Hi, my name is Donielle Johnson. I am a chemist by background, currently the Vice President of Global Regulatory Affairs and Policy Intelligence at Bausch Lomb. I have been in the medical device business for about 20 years. I started my career actually as an intern at Medtronic, and I transitioned over to regulatory affairs. And I've been in regulatory for almost the last 18, 19 years. And I spent the last 10 years living abroad as an expat in Amsterdam. I've worked in the cardiovascular space, imaging, orthopedics, ophthalmics, wound closures, vessel closure devices. So it spanned the different categories of devices, but also different geographies. So I specialize in the US and the EU, but I've also done work in Japan, Middle East, Africa, LATAM, Canada, Russia, CIS.
It's a big reach there, Donielle, and I know we've had some good conversations prior to this. And actually, you know, you've done a lot of international travel. You've relocated to lots of different continents, and yeah, it's quite an inspiring story as well. So thank you for joining us today. And last but certainly not least, we've got Carmen joining us. Thank you so much for joining. And could you do an introduction as well? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. So for me personally, I actually have a background in process engineering. This is sort of where I started. And I keep telling people I had two lives because my very early career was in automotive. So I worked different industry, different environment, European based. And then I transitioned into pharma about 14 years ago, always in finance roles. So I've made a nice finance career. But switching into pharma got me really excited about life science, about the R&D side of it, and where the heart of any business is. So I've had a career starting in the US in pharma, working with different business partners, global environments, and then transitioning over to Basel. So back to Europe, in a way, in a leading finance executive role, in addition to stepping actually in the hardcore science world in running the operations for the research organization there. And now back to the US in a finance role, end-to-end R&D from very early all the way to medical affairs, commercial, so broad spectrum, always business partnering, finance roles.
Yeah, amazing. And actually, we, you know, the three of us have connected naturally before today. And I think what was really nice is all of your journeys and all of your backgrounds, obviously quite different, you know, whether it's an engineer initially by trade, chemist, but it's great to kind of see the fact that all of you have reached, you know, a significant level within the life sciences space, but almost completely different paths, and often not always driven vertically up from a career standardized, you know, career ladder perspective, which you often, you know, envisage. You think of career ladder and you just think of going up. And I always remember Lady Lynn Sullivan, who actually joined us last week for a live broadcast, a special for menopause, and she kind of described it as a jungle gym, her career, and actually felt like, you know, in order for her to get to the level in which she's got, actually identifying or going down different routes and gaining different levels of experience along the journey actually only strengthens your kind of experience, exposure and knowledge. So yeah, it's really great to have all three of you here today. So obviously today is about inspiring inclusion, so I can't wait to dive into this topic. We've got some great questions, but before I do, I just want to say hi to the audience that's dialing in. So thank you, Sean, for joining us today. We've got Deborah listening from Scottsdale, wow, formerly from Kansas. So yeah, excited to join us. I think she knows you, Lisa. So thanks for joining, Deborah. We've got Charlie here as well in London dialing in. Libette is a regular. She was a previous key speaker and has joined us for most of them. Do you know Libette? Oh,
We used to work together at Bausch.
No. Oh, yeah. Lovely. Anyway, thank you, Libet, for joining us today. We've got Alexandra as well dialing in. We've got Katie and we've got Santina. So thank you so much from Alabama. Keep them coming through. I'll try to get through as much as possible. So keep saying hello and pop in a question. As I said, a Q, if you've got any questions as we move throughout the comments. So we're going to kick off, I think, with the first question, which I thought was very fitting, which is all about, what does inspire inclusion mean to you? I'm going to come to you first, Lisa, with this, if that's okay. So what does this topic mean to you?
Yeah, it's really, I think, a nice campaign theme for International Women's Day. When I think about inspiring inclusion, I go back to when I launched the company from the university. And I thought about, where do I want to work? When you're in a large academic institution, you don't feel like you have a lot of power over the culture just within your unit, but not broader than that. You're kind of a little fish in a big pond. But when you start your own company, you can think about, where do I want to work? And I enticed my graduate student at the time to join me, and we really sat down and wrote what was the culture that we wanted for the company. And of course, that it included a big part of having a diverse workforce, defined by a lot of different things, like coming from a rural background, first-generation immigrants, just a lot of different ways to look at diversity. We also just, talked about, we want humility and we want all these other characteristics, but that was a part of it. And I think that started for us and has been a continued mission for our company.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's nice. And same question comes to you, Donielle, really. So how did you interpret this topic for International Women's Day?
So I don't want to be a bit cheeky, but I'm going to be. I think I said this before. A mentor said to me once, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. Right. And so every time I think about the topic of diversity and inclusion, because I also feel like you cannot separate the two. I know we're talking about inspiring and inclusion, but it's easier for people to feel included if they are all of the same. I think it's harder for people to feel like they have a voice or they feel like they belong when they are different. So I always lump diversity and inclusion together. And when I was thinking about today, I always think about, am I inspiring people to be able to dance? Right.
I love that. Yeah.
Am I giving them the opportunity to have their voice heard? In the sea of people that work for me, that report up to me, in the big scheme of things in my organization, do I feel like I have a voice? Am I dancing as well? And so just at that simplest form, I look at it that way. And I always question myself is, what could I do better to make sure people are dancing?
Yeah, I love that. Very, very humble and authentic. And I think it's important that's a very important leadership trait to have anyway, is that self-awareness. So many people don't often hold that self-awareness or just ability to step back and actually look at, well, am I doing the right things that is going to inspire others, rather than it just being words or, it's actually no real different, right, from values. From a company perspective, a lot of people say values are often words that just sit on a website, and but it needs to be lived, breathed, and it needs to be, kind of that self-awareness at a leadership level. Like, am I embracing this? So I love the fact that you naturally have obviously hold that quite dearly, and that's quite important to you. So come to you as well, Carmen, with the same question. What are your thoughts with this?
Yeah, I mean, that was beautiful. And maybe it's a awareness because what I would add is the awareness and the action that needs to follow. So when I looked at inspire inclusion, I think I looked at it from two lenses. One was sort of, what is my contribution? When I think about teams I've built in the past or environments, cultures I shape, what can I do to create an inclusive environment, safe environment for people to speak up, for example, or even to celebrate diversity, right? To really embrace that diversity of thought, perspective, people on your teams. And again, maybe there's an invitation to say, what's the one action everyone on the call can commit to for this year, right? To really live and breathe the inclusion piece.
Yeah.
And then I think I was looking at it from a ecosystem perspective as well. So that is sort of the other lens I put on. How can we, when we look at our companies or where we work, our experiences, just to create and help to create a more inclusive environment? And I think it starts with the way we think about our customers, our talents, our investors, and what are some measures or things we can do to sometimes, and I'm going to use the word force, right? But to force a little bit more of an inclusive environment in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, it's the action part that's so important, isn't it? It's the acknowledgement, it's the self-awareness, it's the understanding, but then it's actually, well, what's being put in place? What actions are we taking? Do we know that we're making positive steps forward? How are we looking at that? Lots of different thoughts in regards to that. I have to ask, actually, because this kind of question, I guess, came through earlier, but what women has inspired your professional career journey? So, with that great synopsis that you've all provided around what inspiring inclusion means to you, have you ever connected that to somebody that you maybe were inspired by in your career journey, previously? Who am I going to come to with that one? I'm going to come with Donielle. I threw that out there. Sorry, I didn't
I have
target them.
actually been very, very, very fortunate to have a lot of great people inspire me. I mean, I'm a chemist because my grandmother was a chemist.
Oh, love
So
that.
I got my original passion and love of science right at home. And I will say I come from a strong line of women. My mother was one of 5 girls. So at my earliest, my early memories are being around these strong women who always inspired me to be great. And then throughout my professional career, my first mentor who told me to get in regulatory, her name was Karen Ruth Jarman. And she told me that with my mouth and my brain, I was in the wrong role and I should move into regulatory. And that's some of the best advice I've actually taken from someone. And I still, try to keep in touch with her. She's a science teacher now. She's retired from industry and she teaches science to middle schoolers, still pouring in to them. And I would say one of my last is someone who's no longer with us. Her name is Sharon Piper Diggs, and she passed away a few years ago from cancer. And she inspired not only me, but a countless amount of women who worked at Guidant and Medtronic. She was a big champion for women and African Americans to grow in the medical device industry. And I met her at the time when my mom had died. And her family not only embraced me on a professional level, but also embraced me on a personal level. So I have been ridiculously fortunate to have some amazing women along my journey to hold my hand, to pick me up, and to inspire me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Do you feel like that's pushed you through to get to where you are today?
Oh, absolutely.
All of
I
those
always feel like I
identities.
do not want to let them down.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
and I grew up with the motto, to whom much is given, much is required. So it also has allowed me to give back. I'm a mentor with the program called SMDP that inspires future diverse scientists that are seeking opportunities in the medical device field as they're coming out of grad school, finishing up their master's or their PhD programs. So absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And it's lovely for you to share that personal experience and journey as well. I'm going to come to you, Lisa, with the same question. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I have
Who
a
inspired
similar
you?
answer. Really, really fortunate. My first employer was a woman who owned her own travel agency. I was a high school student, so I started with a female mentor. I chose luckily the profession of physical therapy to start, which is a predominantly female profession, and had female instructors and bosses and employers. Even in my university at the medical center, which is predominantly a male culture and setting, in my department, when I was chair, I had a female dean. Above her was the female executive vice chancellor for the medical school. and above her was a female chancellor for the entire university. That doesn't happen very often, but everywhere I looked up, there was women. And that was amazing time. And that is, in fact, when I launched, with their support, is when we launched the company. So I have too many people to even name. Most recently, then, I stepped into the president's role and brought in a CEO, Stella Vanuk, who has also been on.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
She's been a great advocate as well of this community.
Right.
Yeah, Stella's
Right.
lovely.
So as I knew all the science, she brings all that business experience. And so again, I'm learning from her, and hopefully she's learning a little bit from me as well, but a great team. So I have just been so fortunate. And to answer your second question, absolutely, I would not be here without those female role models along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they almost act as, even though they're not even at the time potentially playing that mentor kind of role, they are kind of under the surface, aren't they, in terms of what you're listening and learning, and just that, kind of crutch, really kind of support mechanism. So that's lovely that you've also had that experience. And Carmen, the same question for you. Who's inspired you?
This is a very interesting question, and it just got me reflecting on. I'm building a puppet with my son right now for school, and he has to make it of Betsy Rose. Okay. I'm not sure if many of you guys know who she is, but she's the first woman who made an American flag. And it made me reflect on the fact that, and then the question came up, like, how many women do you actually know in history, right?
Yeah.
That it made it big, or right, that can be a role model. And it was a very limited list initially when we started to do the research on, right? And how many people know of Betsy versus Abraham Lincoln, or it just made me reflect on this question a little bit. So what I would say is, it wasn't one woman. I mean, similar to all the other stories, it's some of the traits, right, that I experienced in my role models along the way. And I'm just going to name a couple. I think one that stands out for me is when I see someone who's actually uplifting other women, right, who really speaks up and stands up as an advocate and sponsor, versus, it's me and I'm better, for this.
Yes.
I mean, I think this is something that we sometimes still struggle with, especially as female leaders, to help each other, to grab our hands and lift us all up together. So I think that's something that is exciting to me when I see that in someone. I think the second one is, and I'm going to use maybe the more UK, but people who can get up, adjust your crown, and then you move on, right? That just have that tenacity, or whatever you call it. I mean, nothing is stopping you. I mean, it can be really bad, and I've seen people go through cancer, losing their jobs, different things.
Yes.
This positive attitude for can do, and again, I will
Resilience.
adjust my crown and move on. It's something really inspiring to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, some great great examples of people, and some great examples of the types of characteristics, right, that I think are important, shared there by Carmen. So the question that I think would be quite an interesting one to dive into is that, from a workplace perspective and from an organization point of view, do you feel like there are strategies that maybe companies are executing to bridge that gender gap, promote, develop and support women transitioning into the industry? Are there any specific strategies that stand out for you that are good, that are working, that for potentially anybody on this call that's in a position or in a business that could think about incorporating? Lisa, I'll come to you with this question.
Yes, I think being in Kansas City, diversity, inclusion has to be intentional. I can't put an ad out for a new position and hope that a person of diversity will apply. I have to go after them. And interestingly, I was uncomfortable with that at first. I wasn't sure that was the right approach. I was at a conference, and I believe it was someone, upper administration person from, I think, Pfizer, who talked about, planning in advance. This is the kind of person I want. These are the attributes I want. And I'm not just talking about diversity attributes, all of it, teamwork, humility, all of that. But included in that is this is the type of person. And then go out and find that person rather than hoping that they apply for your position. Because in Kansas City, I probably won't get them. And so that's been a freeing. I remember listening to him thinking, just feeling free. Okay, I can do what my intention was, but I was always a little bit afraid to move on that.
Yeah.
So I think that's number one. And then starting early mentoring. I'm sure we're going to talk about this a lot, but getting that pipeline of applicants, even locally, of women, of underrepresented groups in high school, in the colleges, bringing them in as interns into the company. That I think also is a very important strategy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And I think, Donielle, you do a lot of work. You've talked about that community group, that you're a part of and helping people transition as well into the industry from perhaps academia. So what are your thoughts around some key strategies that companies could consider if they're not considering perhaps to help, bridge the gap?
So I think, first of all, companies need to hold that mirror up in their face, right? Look at your board of directors, look at your executive leadership team. Where are you missing, right? They have to be able to hold the mirror in front of their face first. I am very lucky. I attended a historically Black college and university. And I love every year, twice a year, the university has a college fair, right? Where companies can come on campus, meet the best, meet the brightest. I also realized that to go to a university was a privilege. My grandparents went to college. My parents went to college. I went to college. I know women and men that look like me that did not have that same privilege. Does it make them any less smart? So I think we also need to reimagine, the workforce of the future, things that we need. Can they be taught on the job? What programs do we have for there? How are we doing outreach? And I think as I look at, I'm an expat, so I live abroad. But as I'm looking lately at the political environment in the US, I am very concerned that we're rolling back the clock on DEI versus moving forward to become a more inclusive society. And it really, really concerns me. So I think a law should make you want to be a diverse company, because guess what? Diversity is good for business. Right. You get, and it's about women, it's about men, it's about people of color, it's about different thoughts. Right. Does everyone that work at McKinsey have to have a Harvard Wharton MBA to be a good consultant? I look at things like that and I say, how can we shift our mindset?
Yeah.
But first we got to hold that mirror up to our face and say, you know what? We are definitely what I call a vanilla company. How do we inject a little bit more flavor?
Yeah, I love that. So eloquently put. And I think that you are seeing more statistics. And I think there was some reports coming out on the back of 2023 where there is almost proof that businesses are financially more successful if there is more diversity within the organization. So I 100% agree with you. It shouldn't be about, what law is being rolled out. It's far bigger than that. But I'm going to come to you, Carmen, with the same question. What are your thoughts with this?
Yeah, I mean, for once in some of my previous roles, what I've done is established female leadership programs and, scaling them up through the organization and looking at it from a academic approach, right? Compared to traditional programs that just focus on the up leveling of women, for example, right? Or providing trainings to really create an ecosystem around that program that involves sponsorship, that involves senior leadership, that involves, men, even though this is a women leadership program. So I'm a firm believer that it's not about upskilling. It's about changing the environment, changing the ecosystem around, and being very inclusive in that. That will actually yield into sort of a changed opportunity, I would say.
I love. Go, Lisa.
Cut in. So I want to pick up on something that Donielle said, which is, and you talked about too, that companies are stronger. We are women-led. We are, probably a third would identify as Black or brown. We're probably about the same percentage are first-generation immigrants. When COVID hit, nobody blinked. I mean, these are people who one of my top leaders couldn't get a loan and for a home when I recruited him here until my husband and I said, well, you know, we white people will co-sponsor the loan. We'll co-write the loan. You know, they face diversity every day. So when I say we have to cut back a little bit on some funding or COVID hit, it was just so easy. I mean, we were so much stronger because these are people who we all as a group have to be flexible, resilient, gritty because of the diversity and inclusion that I think was baked into the company. So I think it's so important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And I got an interesting one that's sort of, it's just come to mind, I guess, off the back of this question, but it feels like there is a challenge, and some feedback we've been getting from the US market over the past month with having some, boots on the ground over there, was that this fine line between organizations trying to hire diversity and positive discrimination seems to be coming up quite a little bit more in the last, probably 6 months or so. Is there any advice or any thoughts in regards to that? Because, we got to be so careful internally, that there isn't this act in which, businesses are taking the wrong action and, positively discriminating on the back of hiring people. Is there any thoughts that you've got in regards to, I guess, that, Lisa, from a corporate perspective?
Yeah, I'm like Danielle, I'm very disheartened. Again, coming from an academic background where DEI was central to the university and the university's mission. And then to see government legislators trying to squash diversity efforts in private institutions is just stunning to me. I can't believe we're even here, but we are. And I do think that we're at a real fearful time of rollback of a lot of initiatives that have been important. And I think from a public standpoint, the problem is the DEI initiatives are not understood. And they've been misrepresented by some for political gain or social media. I think we have not done a good job of explaining what the purpose is, how it works.
Why?
It's not reverse discrimination in any way. My child, if they didn't get into Harvard, it wasn't because they were white. It was because they didn't have the grades. I mean, let's be honest about it. But that's not the perception that's being, that's not the story that's being told. And it is, to me, very disheartening.
Yeah,
maybe I can add to that, just building on, I think, your comment earlier around intentional. D&I efforts are still very intentional, right? And if I steal sort of this idea of reimagine the workforce of the future, I think what's happening right now is because they are intentional and they're overdone sometimes to the extreme, focusing on the obvious, right? On women, on color, on different things. But diversity inclusion is so much more than that. So I have this theory, right? As we move into a different world where younger people come in, the younger generation, right? I think it's just more natural. Or, senior leaders, high performing teams, for me, it's a no-brainer that high performing teams you can only create if you have diversity of thoughts, people, everything. And it's not just the obvious, right? So I would imagine that if we move into a society where the younger generation takes more of leadership roles, hopefully, and again, I'm controversial here, hopefully this does not have to be such a big conversation anymore because it comes more natural to them, right? When I think at startup environments, it's already there, right? I mean, they operate differently than sometimes big corporations.
So I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. Diversity and inclusion initiatives, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives are there to help level a playing field, right? Let's go back and just look at in the 70s, women couldn't even buy homes on their own. I was born in the 70s. So when I think about that, I'm not that old. Right?
Nope.
And women could not buy homes on their own. So now just think about houses today. I'm looking at a house right now, right? Average house in North Carolina is $500,000, right? I don't have, my female relatives didn't have all this equity to pass on to me. So I have this generational wealth to be able to afford a house without worrying about these high interest rates. So my starting block is here, where my colleagues or some of my counterparts, their starting block was way up here. So I'm trying to catch up. And I, at the simplest form, and I know it's more complex than that, but I try to tell people DE&I initiatives are just trying to level the playing field. And then I agree with what Carmen said, is that once the playing field is leveled, hopefully biases that were done in the past with this new generation, we're no longer seeing those biases. But if I always had to start here, and Carmen and Lisa are starting here, no matter what, without some sort of initiative, I will never catch up to them, no matter how hard I try. And I think I'm really passionate about this because I have two friends right now that are being sued by Edward Bloom because they started a fund, a venture capital fund called Fearless Fund. And women are not getting access to capital. And they started this fund to give women access to capital because banks aren't giving them that. And he sued them. And the court has blocked them from being able to provide capital to women startups. So even in Carmen's ideal world, if I'm a woman trying to start a business and I can't get access to capital, I'm still down here while my male counterparts are still up here. And that's, I think, what people need to understand about D&I. It is not including or discriminating against a certain group. It's trying to help to level the playing field for those who have been historically marginalized. If we never had that bias, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. But the reality is, I feel like we keep not discussing the elephant in the room, which is bias exists. And it exists for a very long time. And I hope that I have children and they grow up in a world where there is no bias. But the playing field has to be leveled before that.
Before that happens. Yeah. 100%. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that, you didn't take it off in a different spin. I think it absolutely needed to be said. So I can feel the passion there as well, Donielle. So thank you. I've got to dive as well into the audience because I think, we've got a lot of people here. We've got Elena here saying, what an admirable panel, enjoying the insights and your story of inspiration. So thank you, Elena, for sharing. We've got somebody dialing in from Colorado. If they're LinkedIn user, you just got your settings set to private, so we can't always see where it is or who it is that's dialing in. But we got Candice as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I think Libette's also said hi Donielle. So she obviously she heard that, which is brilliant. We've got some questions coming through here as well. In fact, Elena has just actually shared a link here to say, that 30% of the executives are women, more likely to outperform companies with this where this percentage ranged from only 10 to 30. So we've got some good stats. In fact, I think I was looking at the McKinsey report, so that's probably where I got some of my data from as well. A question here from Georgia, which I thought was quite a good one, is how can academic institutes play a role in preparing the next generation to be advocates for diversity and inclusion in their fields? I feel like you kind of touched a little bit upon that. I think it was Lisa. You were saying about the importance of setting up, but from a corporate, I mean, how does that work? What's your advice in regards to that from an institution perspective?
Yeah, I'll go back to what Carmen said, which is in my experience in academia, it was the students who were leading the faculty in inclusion in DEI. It was the students that were many times demanding more be done, especially in the admissions process and the recruiting process. Again, when you're in the Midwest, you can't just hope that you'll get a diverse class because the state of Kansas is not a diverse state. So, but the students were demanding it. So I think that we can go back to saying in a lot of places, the faculty are trying to catch up to the students.
Love that. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing. We've got so many coming through. I'm actually conscious of just trying to share as many and get to the audience as much as possible. Santina, she's put a great comment here. I think that the biggest goal of DE&I initiatives is to be fostering belonging. Santina, I've heard about belonging a lot, actually. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. We all belong on the dance floor. Quote to Donielle, I think that the quote by Arthur Chan, diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, belonging is an outcome. That's very well said. Thank you very much for sharing that. I've also got a question really here from Ian. How can male colleagues best play the role of allies?
Lend your voice. In my opinion, it's just that simple. Lend your voice. When you see, if you are a male colleague that is sitting on an executive leadership team or any team where you don't see any people of color, where you don't see any women, why not question it? Question the why. Be the change that you want to see. Be the one to go out and hire the
sponsorship, right? Being a great advocate, speaking up for someone you've seen done great work goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I think even in a small way, being at the table, and when someone is being passed by, everyone's giving their opinion or thoughts, and someone's being passed by, or their voice isn't being heard, to just I don't think we heard from Lisa. Lisa, could you give, just as simple as that can make such a difference.
Yes. Love that. Thank you so much for diving in, and thanks for the question there, Ian. Got another question here as well from Matthew. Do we think until we have generational turnover within the executive leadership level that strategies will continue to be challenging to initiate? I'm going to come to you, Donielle, with this one. What are your thoughts here?
You really want to come to me with this?
No. Again, go for it.
So here's the thing. I don't want to be controversial, but
do it.
I do believe that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So I don't believe we have to wait for all the baby boomers to get out of industry. I do believe that people can learn new things. So I don't believe that we have to wait for them. Yep. I do think they have to be willing to learn those new tricks. And I laugh because I have older relatives that I talk to on the phone now. And I remember back in the day, I'm one of the generations that cross over technology, right? So I've had the rotary phone.
I remember
cordless phone. I had the first flip phone, and now I have the iPhone. And so when I talk to older relatives, they've now learned how to use the iPhone, right? They've learned how to FaceTime me. So, I live abroad, and so we get on our video calls like this. So I really believe if you really want to, you can learn about why it's important to have diverse candidates. I don't think we need to wait for all the baby boomers to retire or die.
And I think, and I think, Donielle, I think it comes to my mind here as well that from a generational turnover or the executive leadership level, what we see, right, globally is often a 50% decline in women in leadership levels from sort of management through to director. And whether that is because of, menopause, we know 1 in 4 people can often step back from their roles, or whether it's, returning to work after parenthood and, they don't, whether imposter syndrome hits or whatever it might well be, that they don't end up taking that next level up. But I think that, there's things there for that dynamic to change, for people to break through that glass ceiling, women to continue to climb, further initiative support in corporate organizations to support women returning to work, etc., etc. So that also comes to mind, how if we can embrace more diversity with women climbing up the ladder, I think that will also help at that executive leadership level.
Well, and also remember, at that level, you're not applying on LinkedIn for a job. It's all based on relationships. So if the current executive leader only has relationships with other men, and he has no women in his preview or no people of color in his preview, then guess what? The cycle is going to continue to perpetuate itself.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts with this, Carmen? Anything to add to
Yeah, I
this?
mean, certainly not white, right? I think I'm hoping with the turnover it will become more of a natural than it is right now, right? I think right now it is really about this word intentional in a way. But I would go broader, right? What strategies are difficult to implement? I think, we've tried many things, from quota to trainings to, development opportunity, sponsorships. I think it's we need to continue to push those things, keeping
Yep.
in mind that, this is what is needed right now. But what I would add is what I mentioned earlier. I think go broader, right? It's not just about women and talent. It's also how can you create, and I'm going back to the inclusion theme here, right? An inclusive environment by, listening to your customers, right? Or as a customer, making certain demands, right?
Yeah.
As an investor, making certain demands, right? For your talent, make certain demands, right? We had, for example, a procurement organization that when they looked at new suppliers they would bring in, they made sure they had a diverse workforce, for example. It was one of the criteria, right? So how can you get more demanding, I guess, in other areas that maybe are not the obvious ones?
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. I mean, great question there as well, Matthew. Thank you for sharing that. Conscious of time creeping in, so I've probably got one of these as one of my last questions here. But how do you what are your thoughts around fostering that more inclusive environment internally? And I guess rolling that in with, do you feel like creating measurable goals can help create to hold, leaders and teams maybe more accountable for promoting inclusion and diversity? I think this can be a controversial one to a degree. Some people feel maybe, measurable goals as, should be there, some not. So I'm really interested to hear your authentic thoughts in regards to this. Lisa, I'm going to come to you with this one first.
Yes, I saw this a lot again in academia. They always need measurable goals. I don't think it was very helpful. It's a checkbox, it's a checklist that you have to check things off. And I think it makes it in many ways less authentic. I think a far more important thing we haven't talked about yet, so I'm going to throw it out there, is listening to people, listening to where they are, what's going on in their lives, making safe spaces, whether it's at the conference table or whether it's in the break room. That we can share what's going on. I think that's far more meaningful and authentic than a checklist.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And Donielle, what are your thoughts with this?
Nothing else to say. Lisa said it all for me. I 100% agree with her. Authenticity, I think, is the catchword that I got from that.
Yes. Yeah. And Carmen, your thoughts?
I would build on what Donielle said earlier about leveling the playing field. I think where we are today, we still need something to be measured, right? And for me, I would go back to my early career. I mean, I'm a process engineer. I was sitting in a classroom with two other women, all men. I started in the automotive industry, so my name, I think Carmen, is very telling for my early career, right? On the environment I was building a career in. And how hard I had to fight to make a career, or at least the perception of it is, they need to see how good I am. So I need to give 150% all the time. And it's all about that. Not willing to accept help, like women leadership programs. I don't need that, right? I mean, talking quota, why, this is so not me, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where I am right now, let's just embrace it. If it's there, it can help us. And I think it can help us leveling that playing field, as Donielle nicely said.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's
taking advantage of it. If it's the right thing, hopefully, again, it will change in the future. It's not needed anymore. But when it's there, take advantage of it.
I love that. Thanks, Carmen. And I just wanted, because I know that we've touched upon this as a group, and I wanted to get this out before we come off live. But there was this discussion that we had around the fostering internally and the measurable goals around the importance of perhaps not just having DE&I as an initiative that is almost standalone within a business. whether it's a department or a team, it's kind of embedding the whole inclusive and the equity piece as a DNA strand, really embedding it as part of the business's fabric. Is there any of you that want to, kind of go beyond that or talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what Lisa said about being authentic, right? If you have this separate set, it makes it seem like I'm just differentiating this group. I'm doing it to check the box. I don't really value diversity because it is not embedded in the fabric of my company, right? Just like we value, companies put their mission and their vision statements out there, and they have their value proposition that they go to their investors with. Part of that needs to be like, we are committed to diversity. If we have initiatives, these are initiatives. It can't just be these little one-liner HR in fine print on the bottom of a contract or something.
Yeah, it becomes a bit more of a PR campaign than it actually, because it means something, means change. No,
and actually living it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Carmen mentioned about having diversity in your suppliers and not just in your employees. You have to live it, right? I don't want to just hear I have this one leadership program for women. They go through it and wow, we're magically diverse now, right? Where are you recruiting from? Right? Are you looking at female colleges? Are you looking at historically Black colleges? Are you hiring, diverse candidates? What strategies have you created to bring in diverse suppliers, minority suppliers, startup suppliers, right? How is your company, fostering an environment? I think Lisa mentioned about how she helped to get an employee a loan. Well, guess what? A diverse supplier may be smaller because they didn't have access to that capital. So how are you taking your capital and investing in them, right? It has to be woven all in the fabric of your values to really be authentic.
Yeah, lovely. So very well put, Donielle. Very conscious of the time. It's been an absolutely great discussion. But this question we ask all of our speakers on our live broadcast. So I'd love to come to you with, what is the best bit of advice you would give your younger self? And Carmen, I'm going to come to you first with this question.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about one of the things, right, that I would tell my younger self, that it's not always about the fight. You can be vulnerable, you can accept help. I think that's what I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So I would pick another one, which is always change your perspective. Always try to step in someone else's shoes and look at from how they would be looking at it. And it makes your end product, whether this is a deliverable or your perspective or your culture, so much stronger. And I'm going to end with a quote from Einstein, because he said 6 + 3 = 9, but so does 5 + 4, which as a finance professional, that sort of
no, I love that. I love that, and that empathy piece, I think, is so important. Thank you so much, Carmen, for sharing that. And Lisa, what's the one bit of advice you'd give your younger self?
Well, I'm gonna maybe take a little bit opposite. My best advice that I give young, especially women now, is it's all about timing. So I couldn't have started a company if I had kids at home. If you are passionate and enthusiastic, hard worker, focused, you are going to have opportunities presented to you at every point in your career. I've seen too many women burn out, especially in the medical field, and leave medicine completely because they needed a woman on this committee, and they needed, anybody who says to you, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, it means they need you to do something for them. It's not about you. And so choose wisely in your career. I started Likarda when I was in my 50s. Choose wisely how you time things so that you don't burn yourself out.
Burn out. We actually did a whole topic last year on how to burn bright without burning out, because certainly since the COVID period, there's been a significant burnout actually globally. So thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And Donielle, your thoughts as well, and your bit of advice.
So mine would be similar to Lisa's. Put your oxygen mask on first. They always say that on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first. And I would also say to my younger self, you are enough.
Mhm.
You don't
Yeah.
have to you don't have to always be an overachiever.
Yeah.
You are enough.
Mhm.
And personalize your personal life. You know, people always ask me, how do I get to where I got to at my age? And I always say it was a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, over the
Yeah.
last couple months, I've been reflecting. Has the sacrifice been worth it?
Mhm.
I love what I do, but if I had to do it all over again, I would have gone on a date with the guy that asked. You know, I would have had the baby. I would have done those things.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the right company is going to be there for you at the right time.
Yeah.
And work-life balance is something that will never exist, but work-life harmonization should. And if you feel like that work-life harmonization is not existing for you, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you, and all different bits of advice, but absolutely sound bit of advice. So thank you so much for sharing. We're actually like almost 5 to 10 minutes over our normal time, and the hour always absolutely flies by. So I just want to say thank you so much to the audience for joining us. What I would also love, because this is a huge big part of our kind of mission statement around connecting, inspiring, and championing women, is that actually as an organization, Fraser Dove, we've just created an e-guide to help retain the brightest minds in the industry. So there will be a link within the comments that you can click on. It will take you to a web page, but it's a full-on brochure around the importance of retention. So I think, if you get the opportunity, go and check it out. It's an amazing document that's been created here by Market Insights and our marketing team. And also, I just want to give a massive shout out, because it was this week that our Lift Up Journeys podcast has launched and is now live, and we're going to be distributing that on a weekly basis. Every Wednesday, a podcast is going to be coming out with Katie Barber, who is an amazing Lift Up ambassador of ours. She was the one that was in Basel earlier this week and has really committed herself in speaking to some phenomenal women in the life sciences industry. And there will be a podcast. Yes, absolutely. So there is a podcast every week for about the next dozen weeks, I think. So please go and check those out. Great stories, career stories and journeys and advice given. So yes, thank you so much for everybody that's been a part of this Comments Community live broadcast today. And naturally, thank you so much to Lisa, Carmen and Donielle for joining. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. So yeah, thank you. And until next time, we'll be back for a live broadcast in a month's time. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.